A ticket to ride or a worthless piece of paper if your airline goes bust?
I'm extremely disappointed. So, anyway, what can you do?
On this week's programme, we investigate what your rights are if your airline goes under.
Darkness sweeps across the Pacific and South Korea lights up with thousands of lanterns. That's coming up on Insider Guide.
And we follow in the footsteps of Captain Scott on a journey to Antarctica. Hello and welcome to Fast Track. I'm Fiona Foster. Now, it has to be one of the worst travel nightmares. You arrive at the airport en route to your dream holiday only to find that your airline has gone bust. And perhaps even worse, maybe you find yourself stranded at some foreign airport miles away from home. Well, that's exactly what happened a few months ago when the no-frills carrier Air Australia announced it could no longer pay its fuel bill. So when you have eventually managed to struggle home, what are your rights and can you ever get your money back? Carmen Roberts reports now from Sydney.
I'm stranded at the edge of the world.
It's been a turbulent start to 2012. At least 3 airlines have gone bust, and the industry says even more are heading for a fall. Most alarmingly was the Hungarian national carrier Malev that collapsed in February, shortly after second-tier Spanish airline Spanair shut up shop in the first month of the year.
We've cut the journey, it's affected my hotel reservation, and the car rental I had for 2 p.m. won't work as I won't arrive till 2 a.m, so I won't have a car.
Budget carrier Air Australia, formerly Strategic Airlines, collapsed just a few weeks later.
Passengers were quite literally about to board a plane only to be told that there was no money to fuel the aircraft. So there were passengers stranded in Australia wanting to travel to Asia, which is largely the destination place that Air Australia travels to. And then of course there were people stranded in some of these Asian destinations as well, wanting to come home.
Air Australia was a relatively small player on the Australian aviation market. It had a handful of jets flying to overseas destinations like Hawaii, Bali and Phuket. But still, around 4,000 holidaymakers were left stranded when the airline collapsed back in February.
The most frustrating thing is no one's here to help us or anything.
Yeah, we've tried calling and no one's answering the phones or anything.
I'm extremely disappointed. So, anyway, what can you do?
Victoria Milner is packing for an upcoming trip to Australia, and she's thankful that this flight is booked with a legacy carrier after she found out, purely by chance, that her upcoming tickets to Ibiza with Spanair are now worthless.
I don't think that they would say in advance that they're, oh, hang on, we're looking a bit ropey, we don't want you to book with us. They're not going to do that. What I do think's bad is that they don't inform you when once they've gone bust, which happened in February or something, January, yeah. So we're now in April, and I could have at least booked flights previously, like another flight, to get a better deal, but now I'm going to be stuck with whatever I can get.
Spanair posted a statement on its website urging customers to fill in a compensation form. But for travellers like Tori, it's little comfort.
So the administrator that's been appointed says you can fill in this form and they will assess you as a creditor amongst all the other creditors that obviously the airline has. Pretty sure that I'm going to come fairly low in the list of creditors. But I thought I might try anyway. Actually, the form didn't work, so I haven't done that yet. But I did use my Visa card to pay for the flight, so I don't know if I'll go through travel insurance or through the Visa avenue, whatever's easiest to try and get my money back.
Consumer advocate group Choice is now calling for an ombudsman in Australia, similar to the UK system, to help holidaymakers get adequate compensation.
Look, some people might say, it serves you right if you're only forking out a limited amount in comparison to perhaps some of the more expensive airlines. But really, if you purchase a ticket going to a destination, you're entitled to get there. In Australia, we have a travellers or a travel compensation fund, and that helps to protect passengers if they've booked through a travel agent and that travel agent becomes insolvent. We don't have any protections as such when an airline moves into administration or becomes insolvent. And so this has raised some issues around those sorts of elements to our travel industry.
We can't expect the average traveller to keep tabs on every airline's balance sheet, but are there some simple warning signs that we can take note of before we book that ticket?
Unfortunately for passengers, there's very little that they would be able to know beforehand. Normally if an airline is cancelling flights, that's a sign of trouble. I wouldn't normally personally travel on an airline which is cancelling a lot of flights out of the blue, because honestly, you want to get from point A to point B, and if they're cancelling flights, you don't know whether you'd be able to do that. So that to me is the one clear sign.
Other signs are more obvious. Travel Agents Flight Centre were warning customers as early as November last year that Air Australia was experiencing financial difficulties, yet customers didn't heed the warning. So there are some top tips that many will agree on. Make sure you pay by credit card and get good travel insurance.
The insurance cover that comes automatic with some premium credit cards, your gold style or your platinum credit cards, some of those policies actually covers an airline when it becomes insolvent. So check the terms and conditions. If you've got insurance, a standalone policy, double check. If you've got concerns about the airline you're booking with, you may not be covered. At the end of the day, it's about protecting yourself, having as much information as you can.
Carmen Roberts reporting from Sydney, and do let us know what you think. Maybe you could share with us your worst stranded scenario, or perhaps you've got a more inspirational story about how you took on an airline and won. Write to us at our usual address, that's fasttrack@bbc.com. Time now though for a look at what else is making the news in the world of travel this week.
India's troubled Kingfisher airline could be about to be thrown a lifeline if the Indian government announces that it will allow foreign carriers to make big investments in the country's airlines. Last week, Kingfisher closed down its last international route, and analysts say that an injection of cash is urgently needed to keep it in business. The airline is currently over $1 billion in debt. TripAdvisor has launched a new tool to tackle the tricky issue of authenticity. Travel reviews from your Facebook friends and their friends will now be listed above those of generic users on the site. TripAdvisor hopes the new feature will boost its trust factor and says you're now 10 times more likely to find personalised travel advice on the site. And if you're hoping to do some sightseeing in London soon, don't expect to see the famous fountains in Trafalgar Square in full flow. Thanks to a drought across much of southern England and a hosepipe ban in the capital, the fountains, which had a pre-Olympic refit back in 2009, have been switched off until the rain returns. Now to a topic that seems to have interested many of you. Are the French rude?
Our landlord at this apartment we're staying on is literally the nastiest person I've met in my life. We got there and all he did was yell at us the entire time.
We tried escargot today for the first time and the waiter was really nice. They made fun of us a little bit, but it wasn't too bad.
That was the reaction on the streets of Paris when I asked tourists whether they agreed with a recent poll by the travel search site Skyscanner. It concluded that the French ruled as the world's rudest nation. Well, that prompted some of you politely to get in touch. Brian Bennett from Cambalda in Australia says that during an 8-week holiday in France last year,
we encountered ignorant rudeness and offhandedness several times. The Parisians were by far the worst. Restaurant staff in particular were unhelpful. Once we got down to Marseille, it was more pleasant, but we wouldn't go to France again.
Chris Murray from Fécamp in France points out that the behaviour in the capital differs from elsewhere.
It's not the French that are rude, it's the Parisians, and all people in big towns. It's just the same in London. It's big towns that make people rude.
But Bob Burns from Carlisle in America disagrees.
My family and I had the pleasure of visiting Paris 2 years ago, and I found the people to be very helpful and not the least bit rude. We were struggling with 3 large cases on the train from Charles de Gaulle Airport and had numerous offers of help from people.
So, opinion still very much divided there. Thanks for all your comments. Do please keep them coming. And now back to Fiona.
Well, time for a quick break now, but don't go away because Michelle's here with her insider guide to the best things to see and do around the world in the coming months, including where to really celebrate Cinco de Mayo in style. And we join Karen Bowerman as she finally reaches Antarctica, as she follows in the footsteps of Captain Scott the Explorer, who died there 100 years ago this year. Welcome back to Fast Track. Now, you might be one of those people who likes to throw a few things in a suitcase and go off somewhere on a whim. Or you might be more like me, someone who likes to plan a little further in advance. If you are, then this is for you. Here's this month's Insider Guide.
Hello, I'm Michelle Yanachan and this is Fast Track's Insider Guide with my top travel tips from around the world. From May 18th, South Korea will be marking the birthday of the Lord Buddha. The Lotus Lantern Parade is one of Seoul's most spectacular street processions. Thousands of lanterns are lit in the shapes of dragons, phoenixes and of course lotuses, and are strewn from the roof eaves of Jogyasa Temple or set afloat on the Cheonggyecheon stream running through downtown Seoul. At the end of the night, there's dancing amid falling flower petals. At the end of May, the Ord Valley Muster takes place in the Kimberley region, celebrating for a fortnight the culture and landscapes of the dramatic northwestern region of Australia. Visitors can head off on horseback, following the cattle trails of outback stockmen. And on June 2nd, the Kimberley Moon Experience is a nighttime concert on the banks of the Ord River. 500,000 people are expected in Indianapolis to attend the Motor Speedway, or Indy 500, at the end of May. But note, there are race events all month for those with a penchant for speed. And staying in the US, on May 20th, an annular eclipse will be visible from the southwestern states after sightings in East Asia and the northern Pacific Ocean. The eclipse will give the impression of a ring of sunlight as the moon moves in front of the sun. Coming soon will be the best season for rhino tracking in Namibia. I've just returned from there, heading out before dawn by vehicle and then following the lead of trackers by foot along the Klip River Valley. We were lucky and spotted 4 black rhino, but there'll be an even higher chance of success over the next few months.
Winter time it's June, July and August. Then it's most of the waters are dry. So the rhinos are focusing on specific water points.
It's also possible to see migrating elephant herds passing through the valley, as well as springbok, kudu and oryx. Moving over to the Americas, Mexico will be marking its 150-year anniversary of Cinco de Mayo, the festival on May 5th dating back to a battle in 1862. The biggest party can be found in the city of Puebla, which has recently undergone urban renewal projects. Look out on May 2nd for a first, when the city is inaugurating an international mole festival to toast its signature dish, the mole poblano. Wales in the United Kingdom is launching a new hiking trail. The Wales Coast Path will cover over 1,000 miles, ringing the country, which will be open to trekkers, cyclists and horseback riders. This coastline is beautiful with its rugged cliffs, medieval castles and highlands, as well as pretty seaside towns like Tenby. And finally, it's Glamour Month in the south of France, with the Cannes Film Festival from May 16th. But it's not only the stars who should come here now, it's a wonderful time to visit the Côte d'Azur before the hectic high season. Try Nice with its fantastic museum celebrating Henri Matisse, Marc Chagall and Yves Klein. And don't miss the lavender fields of Provence in bloom from late June. Thanks for checking in with my Insider Guide this month. Until next time, happy travelling.
Thanks, Michelle. Now, Antarctica is the coldest, windiest, driest place on Earth. And if you were watching Fast Track last week, you'll remember Karen Baumann setting off to discover it. Well, we rejoin her this week, halfway through her 18-day voyage on an expedition ship, as she visits South Georgia off the Antarctica Peninsula and finally sets foot on the White Continent itself.
When most people think of Antarctica, they think of penguins. And there are thousands of them on Salisbury Plain on the island of South Georgia, where we were greeted by all sorts of weird whistling and beeping sounds.
Just look at this, there are penguins as far as the eye can see. Thousands and thousands of them. They smell a bit, but the view's incredible.
Colony numbers 250,000, swelled by fat, 10-month-old chicks. For us, penguins mean photos, but for scientists, it's a lot more serious. The birds are extremely sensitive to changes in their environment, making them ideal for monitoring climate change. Over the past 17 years, as parts of Antarctica have warmed by 3 degrees, there's been a dramatic change in penguin numbers. Colonies of chinstraps have plummeted by up to 60%, while populations of gentoos have been booming.
Penguins are sending us messages that we need to be listening to. It's my concern, and the concern of all of us who work out here on the front lines, is that whatever responses these penguins are showing in the polar latitudes, at some point the great warming or the big warming will hit us, the rest of us who are living in more temperate latitudes. And some of us are going to survive and adapt, and some of us, maybe many of us, won't. And if we can figure out why it's shaking down the way it is with the penguins of the Antarctic Peninsula, it will give us a clue as to what's going to happen to us, maybe decades from now, maybe centuries from now.
Of course, it's not just the penguins that draw visitors to Antarctica. It's also the icebergs. The continent's home to 90% of the world's ice, 70% of its fresh water. In fact, there's so much ice that Antarctica actually doubles in size every winter, before shrinking accordingly each summer. cruising through this strange, frozen world is a surreal experience.
You can see right into the blue of this one here. That's gorgeous. These icebergs probably fell as snow out of the sky a couple hundred years ago, and once they fall in the water here, the ocean is quite cold, as well as the air temperature, that they don't melt that fast. So these could stay in the water and move around with the tides and the currents for a handful of years.
Finally, we reach our destination, and favourable weather means we can actually set foot on the Antarctic Peninsula.
In all the excitement about getting to Antarctica, I hadn't really thought about how serene this place can be. Ours are the only footprints. It may have taken us almost 18 days to get here, but it's absolutely magical.
It's absolutely mind-blowingly beautiful.
I think it's the fact that it's so tucked away and remote from the cares of the world that makes it so attractive.
It doesn't take much for the White Continent to cast its spell. Even our expedition leader is bewitched.
I love this place, and I love showing it to people. I've been coming here for almost 20 years now, and I just never tire of watching how it impacts people when they come ashore and live their dreams.
Back on our ship, the chefs have prepared a celebratory lunch, served on deck, overlooking the White Continent. It's the ultimate barbecue, with the ultimate view. In front of us stretches the coldest, most isolated region on Earth. It's even more incredible than I imagined.
That's all for this week, but do try and join us again next time when Rajan will be in Poland. It's about to welcome thousands more of us, but is it really ready to play in tourism's Premier League?
The money spent for touristic purposes should be spent otherwise. You don't buy a dress for a party if you cannot afford to buy food.
And a quick reminder that you can always find more travel tips, treats and inspiration on our website at bbc.com/fasttrack. And while you're there, why not follow the link to BBC Travel for even more to enjoy. But until next time, from me, Fiona Foster, and the rest of the Fast Track team, thanks for watching and goodbye.